Hey writers, Ingrid here, and this is Ingrid's Notes where I'm talking about creative writing craft and process. And this is the second video where I'm discussing the pros and cons between traditional publishing and self-publishing. Now in video number 1, I covered submissions, the published product, payment and royalties, rights usage, and contracts. And today we're going to dive into some of the other topics that are really important to think about for your career in terms of where you want to go and how you want to publish. In today's video, we're going to cover the editorial process, marketing, and the overall markets. Editorial. One of the awesome things about traditional publishing is that you are going to get a lot of feedback on your book and you're going to make it 100 times better. Your agent is going to give you feedback. You're going to do revision before you submit to publishers. And then once you have a publisher, you're going to get an editor. You're going to go through the whole editing process. And that is always going to make your book better. In self-publishing, the quality of your book is up to you. You have to hire those editors. You have to have the discipline to say, I actually need outside help. I need somebody else to tell me where my weaknesses are in the story that I can't see. You have to hire and pay that person to give you that feedback. In traditional publishing, there are all of these checks and balances to make sure your book is as high quality as it possibly can. Now that can 100% happen in indie publishing as well, but you have to be accountable. You have to be, that business person, and you have to create those checks and balances and make sure they also exist in your indie published work as well. In traditional publishing, you will also be getting a line editor and a proofreader. Someone is also going to format your book and make it ready for publication. You don't have to do any of those things, except you do look through all of those edits and approve them. In indie publishing, again, you have to hire somebody to do that for you or do it yourself and trust that you will actually catch all of those typos. And yes, I won't deny the fact that a lot of indie publishers skip those steps. They don't get editors. They think their story is brilliant already and good enough. They don't, really fully proofread. That's their choice, but that also does contribute to, yes, sometimes there being this sense that indie published books are of lower quality. Now, that's not true across the board, but it is true in some cases. So I'm going to bust the big myth and dream that if you are traditionally published, you are going to get huge amounts of marketing dollars behind you and you are going to become an instant success. That's just not true. It's true for some people. I just saw a blast come through my email about the new Lanny Taylor YA book, and I had a little thing that said, 6-figure marketing campaign. Fabulous. Lanny Taylor totally deserves that. But is that everybody's life? Absolutely not. Yes, you are definitely going to get support from your traditional publisher in terms of marketing, but it may not be in the way you think. The way in which traditional publishers market is they market to bookstores. Their job is to get your book into Barnes & Noble, to get it on Amazon, to put it into all of the retailers that they can get so that it gets as much exposure as possible. What they don't do, what we think they do, but they don't do as much, is actually market to readers. You're probably not going to be sent on a book tour. That doesn't really happen anymore. Does it happen for some people? Yes, but those are the very big books. It's not going to happen to all of the books. Most of the traditionally published authors that I know are going on book tours on their own dime. They're setting up their own book events. They're setting up, making connections and going to book festivals. They're the ones actually creating their blog tours. Yes, you do get a publicist from your traditional publisher, but that publicist has many books. It's not just your book. They're going through a system of what they're used to doing, given the money they're given. And that's going to be related to your advance. However big your advance is, again, reflects their financial investment and how much marketing they're actually going to do. Do they do some marketing? Yeah. But It's not going to be the type of marketing you imagine. Your job as an author actually is to do most of the marketing. That actually becomes your job, even in a traditionally published deal. In indie publishing, all of the marketing duties are yours as well, just as they were to publish and distribute the book. You are also your own marketer. Now, the difference with indie publishing is that you actually still own the rights to your book, and you have a lot more creativity in the ways in which you can actually market. You can give your book away for free. You can change the price of your book. You can give away samples. You can do all sorts of really interesting and creative things that you can't necessarily do with a traditional publisher. They have to give you permission. They have to decide they're on board with that, and they're busy people. At the end of the day, regardless of if you are traditionally published or indie published, it is your responsibility as the author to build your author platform, to build your readership. Platform is one of those words we don't like. To build your readership. You are the one who is most invested in having a readership, and your readership is your most powerful tool, because if you actually market even before you have a book to market and you build that platform and readership, now you have someone to sell to. You're going to get a bigger traditional publishing deal if you have a platform. You're going to sell more books in self-publishing if you have a platform. In fact, if your platform is big enough, you don't need a traditional publisher, because you just say, hey, I put a new book up, it's on Amazon, and they eat it up like hotcakes. As writers, we're introverts. What I just said about platform probably made a lot of you want to stab yourself in the eyeballs. But if you want to be a professional writer, and if you want to hopefully someday be a full-time writer, you can't ignore this. You have to build a platform. Or you have to gamble and hope that you wrote that book that the publisher has decided to dump all of the money in, and they will build a platform for you. That happens. Absolutely. That is the 0.5%. Let's talk about the market and who these different publishing entities are actually marketing to. In traditional publishing, it will take a long time from the sale of your book to your book being actually on a shelf. Usually that is a minimum of a year. Sometimes it can be 2 years. Now, this is important because when someone in a traditional publishing office buys your book, they're anticipating the market 2 years later. They're not responding to the market as it is right now. They're trying to decide if this is going to be something people will like in the future. Whereas self-publishing is fast. They're really reacting to what is happening in the market right now. As a YA writer, a great example of this is the fact that if you wrote a dystopian novel or a paranormal romance, that would be absolutely dead. Not worth your time if you want to be traditionally published. They are so over it. But in indie publishing, those sell like freaking hotcakes right now. If that's what you're writing, that's where that market is. In terms of pricing, the markets are also very different. Traditional, you're going to sell a physical book between $10 for a paperback to $25 or $30 for a hardcover. Whereas in self-publishing, particularly in ebook, you're selling books for 99 cents, $2.99, $4.99 is starting to get expensive. Whereas someone really has to pick and choose what they're going to spend their $16.99 to $30 on for a hardcover book. Do I want this one or this one? If I get 3, now I'm getting close to $100. I only get 3 stories versus 3 stories for 99 cents is $3. So obviously these different price points are attracting different types of readers. You might think 99 cents for a book, that's ridiculous. That's cheaper than, buying an Easter card and giving it to my niece. But here's the thing, not everybody has a ton of money. There are obviously huge markets of people who will buy books for 99 cents and devour them. I'm not saying books aren't worth $30. Oh my gosh, we spend a ton of time writing books. They are absolutely worth $30. I'm just saying there are different markets of people who are looking for different things. You also have to look at where your readership is. As a teen writer, it turns out that at least right now, most of the actual teenagers buying books are not buying ebooks. They're buying physical books. They want to go to a bookstore, get a book, hold it, and read it. That doesn't mean there isn't an actual audience for YA in self-publishing. In fact, there are tons of self-published YA authors who are doing fantastically well. They're just not necessarily actually selling to teenagers. Yes, they are selling to some, of course, but a significant amount of the online independent publishing YA market is actually adults. Now, that shouldn't be surprising because there's actually a huge adult population of readers for YA for physical books as well. But if it's really, really important to you that actual teenagers get your books, right now, as I'm filming this will be out of date before we know it, that is the traditional publishing route. You have to decide what your idea of success is. As you're listening to all these pros and cons, you have to ask, do I want real teens to read this? Do I just want anybody to read it and I'm making a living? Do I actually want my books in a bookstore? Or do I just want people to read my books? I don't care if they're in a bookstore. These are all things only you can answer.
Stay tuned for video 3, where we're going to talk about the pace of publishing and publishing life in these two different models.
This is Ingrid's Notes. If you've been enjoying these videos, please subscribe and please stay tuned because our next installment will be my final installment where we talk about the life and the pace of these two different publishing models. Stay awesome, writers.